Fighters running in from the right. The Hawk 75 became the standard fighter of France's Armée de l'Air, alongside two homegrown products, the Morin-Saunier MS-406 and the Douatine D520. And the first Allied aerial victories on the Western Front of World War II involved French Curtiss Hawks. That was on the 8th of September 1939, when they shot down a pair of Luftwaffe Messerschmitt Bf-109s. This was really France's best fighter of that period, and 7 Hawk 75 pilots from the Armée de l'Air achieved ace status. And strategically, the Armée de l'Air was, it must be said, inferior to the German aggressor, and it was outnumbered by the Luftwaffe even when the RAF assets stationed in France prior to the Dunkirk evacuation were added in. But on an individual level, its pilots were extremely capable. And their strength was bolstered at that stage by Polish and Czechoslovak pilots who had fled their homelands, taking up refuge in France, only to find that country overrun. And it was from there that many of them made their way to Britain to fight with RAF Fighter Command during the Battle of Britain. The Model 75 was very successful on the export market, but changing allegiances meant the histories of some of the aircraft became quite complicated. Finland took quite a few on strength, a mix of ex-French examples and some cratered Hawk 75 that had been destined for Norway and captured by the Germans, and they then saw extensive use against the Soviets. Meanwhile, after France fell in 1940, some of the surviving French Hawks fled to North Africa, where they formed part of the air force of the German supporting Vichy France. Then when the Allies gained victory in North Africa, they ended up back in the hands of the Free French again. And that's true of this Hawk 75, a veteran of the Battle of France. And I can't think of another warbird airworthy today that flew in combat with both the Allied and Axis forces during World War II. Some of the French Hawks ended up back in metropolitan France during 1944 after the Allied invasion on D-Day, and they were painted with invasion stripes. They were flown presumably as attack aircraft by commanders of some of the Free French fighter groups, and also possibly as part of a unit called the Groupe Patrie, which fought against the German holdouts in the so-called Atlantic pockets. By contrast with the Americans, the P-36, an example of which is the silver aircraft in the display we've just seen, only ever saw combat at Pearl Harbor, following the Japanese attack of the 7th of December 1941. On that date, a pilot from the 46th Pursuit Squadron, 1 Lieutenant Philip Rasmussen, was awakened in his barracks at Wheeler Field, Hawaii, by the sound of aircraft overhead. He saw the Japanese attack out of his window. He attached a .45 caliber pistol to his pajamas, went to his aeroplane. When he reached the airfield, he found many aircraft had been destroyed, but a couple of P-36s and 4 P-40Cs had already launched. Rasmussen and 3 other pilots from the 46th Pursuit Squadron took off in their P-36As to engage Japanese Val dive bombers and Zero fighters. They shot down 2 Vals and 1 Zero for the loss of 1 P-36 and nearly the loss of Rasmussen's, which managed to land back at Wheeler Field despite the fact that it had 500 bullet holes in it. A tremendously underrated fighter in many ways, the Model 75, but it was very, very effective, especially by the standards of the early part of World War II. After its service in the Battle of France, this one went as part of the Vichy French air arm to Oran in Algeria, and it was involved in engagements around North Africa against numerous types of British aircraft, such as Fairey Fulmars of the Fleet Air Arm, and Lockheed Hudson's, Short Sunderlands and Vickers Wellingtons of the RAF. Hawk units of the Armée de l'Air de l'Armistice, as the Vichy French air arm was known, were decimated at the hands of US Navy Wildcats, in particular during Operation Torch, the Allied landings in North Africa in late 1942. Nonetheless, some, as I said, did survive to tell the tale, including this one, which served with the Free French. In fact, it served with the modern French Air Force, the Armée de l'Air, up until 1949 with a training unit. Final pass for the H-75 coming up. A beautiful engine note, that of the 1050 horsepower Pratt & Whitney twin Wasp radial engine. And flying flying over the top of the P-36C, which has just landed in the hands of the Norwegian Rovmeum.